Hey, welcome to Motherhood Equipped, where faith, wellness, ambition, and birth all come together to equip moms to lead with courage and unshakable purpose. I'm Brigitta. I'm so grateful you're here, and I'm committed to learning out loud and living my motherhood journey on purpose right alongside you. So let's link arms and step into all the potential that you already have. Okay, hello guys. I am honored today to welcome Dr. Stuart Fischbein. Thank you so much for being here. I am so grateful and so excited to ask you about a million questions.
Brigitta, thanks for having me. It's always an honor, as I say, to be able to reach an audience who might not have heard of me or might not know something and be able to share wisdom with them. So thanks for having me on.
No, I'm like literally pumped. So to introduce for anybody who hasn't heard of you before, just like a little bit of a background, he is an OB-GYN who has spent decades at this point advocating for physiologic birth, informed consent, the skills that are really just becoming increasingly rare in modern obstetrics, like breech birth, twin birth, VBAC, hands-off support for normal birth. His work really empowers moms to make decisions rooted in confidence instead of fear, which I think is so important. And I guess on a personal note, he was literally a lifeline for me, you guys. I had a breech birth. I've been pretty open about this. A breech birth with my second, and it was a planned home birth, turned totally haywire, and I found myself really navigating breech birth in a way that felt like it was all on my shoulders. And then I stumbled into his podcast, and I truly, navigating a vaginal breech delivery within a hospital system is what I ended up doing, and I truly don't think I would have been able to do it if it weren't for the confidence that your podcast, Dr. Stu, gave me. I mean, even from the moment I found out that he was breech, I felt so much fear because that's all that's talked about is, oh my gosh, my baby's breech. And he wouldn't move. He was breech for like at least 50% of my pregnancy. The first thing your podcast gave me was confidence. And it also helped me create a team because I shared your episodes with my family, and then they got on board, and slowly they were not afraid of breech birth. And they said, oh yeah, Brigitta can do a breech home birth, no problem. So it helped me have confidence going forward. And then it helped me create a team that was also supporting me at the same level of confidence. And then it helped me navigate, which most people who understand this would understand, that like a hospital, an unmedicated hospital breech birth with a bajillion distractions. It was like an educational moment for all their people there. So there were a million people in that room. Like, that confidence is just unmatched. And I truly don't know what I would have done without it. And then on the back end, not to be belaboring the point, but on the back end, I remember after I had him, there was so much emotional whiplash of planning a home birth, getting something totally different. I remember rocking my new baby to sleep in the middle of the night, listening to your podcast, and feeling like, okay, somebody understands what I just walked through, the stuff I had to stand up for that I didn't think I would ever have to stand up for. And it gave me so much comfort when, I was processing wanting to do this, getting something totally different. So I can't say thank you enough.
Wow. As you were talking, I was thinking about how it came to be that you heard from me that gave you the confidence. And I think back to the sliding door moments in life of where I ended up deciding to do OB-GYN in medical school, and I ended up at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles, which happened to be affiliated in 1982, 83, 84 with the busiest hospital in the country, which was LA County USC Women's Hospital, and how breech was just part of the normal teaching that I learned at that time. It was just considered a variation of normal, and we actually looked forward to getting them. And all the people that taught me breech, the Martin Gimofskis, I'll leave somebody out, but there's so many people that have taught me about breech delivery. And then I went on and learned, and I helped other women, and they helped other families, and it spread. And all the mentors and all the midwives that taught me about natural birth pulled me away from the medicalized birth world that I was trained in, thinking that pregnancy was an illness and pregnancy needed to be managed and all that, to realizing that that's only a rare number of cases, and how it all that led to you finding the podcast or whatever it was, and that you ended up having the confidence, and you now are spreading the word. And this is how it works. Right. And I'm very grateful for your story. It gives me a great feeling, and I want to share that with all the people that came before me on whose coattails I tend to walk.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah. Well, it really is important, I think, in the world of birth. There's already fear even before you have a variation of normal. There's already just fear and like, I can't do it. I mean, I run into women all the time who are like, gosh, of course I'm getting an epidural because I can't do that. There's just can't. And there's just assumptions. The second a friend would ask me, "Oh, how's it going?" Oh, whatever. "Oh, yeah, I found out he's breech." "Oh, you're getting a C-section, right?" Like there's just an assumption, and there are all these fear-based assumptions. And so I think it really is just beautiful what you've created, this community of people that are just passing it on, and it's it's passing it on.
Yeah, and it's disturbing to some people, and you can read it when you see posts and you see comments and you see people get really defensive about it. Nothing that I have to say is meant to belittle anybody else.
Mhm.
All I want to do is make sure that people understand that they have choices, that families and women have choices when it comes to things as simple as a breech birth, which they're not going to be able to get from mainstream medicine.
Right.
So when I post something or when somebody else posts something and you see these kind of vicious comebacks about, well, how many babies need to die before you'll wake up or something like, they'll
Mhm.
say stuff like that. It's like, yeah, they're very obtuse. They're very narrow-minded. They don't look at the downstream consequences. This is something that I will get to the specifics of your questions, but when you look at research on OB-GYN or any other topic, but let's just stay in my lane here. Um, Pretty much every paper, the endpoint is only neonatal death, neonatal morbidity. That's it. No papers look at how does that baby doing at age 2? How's that baby's microbiome? How did mom do? How did mom's psyche do? How did she breastfeed? How did she bond? How did she recover? How did she do in her subsequent pregnancy? How did her subsequent babies do? Papers don't look at that. So if your only endpoint is neonatal death or neonatal morbidity, then you can just about justify intervention on anything.
Right.
And even then, you're going to have pretty, not necessarily better outcomes, as we've seen in America and other countries around the world, where despite all the interventions and the creation of a specialty for high-risk obstetrics called maternal fetal medicine, and all the ultrasounds and all the fetal monitoring and all the epidurals and all the instrumentation and C-sections and Pitocin and all the things that we do for women, our outcomes have only gotten worse in my lifetime. And it's not complicated. If they make it complicated, but it's very simple. It's complicating the simple. Just looking back and saying, geez, if all what we're doing is making things worse, maybe we're not doing the right thing.
Right. Right.
But there's too many people with a vested interest in doing the wrong thing that makes it very hard to change. And
Right.
breech birth just happens to fall victim to in one of those categories, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, and I do appreciate what you said at the beginning of that, and I should reiterate, you guys, this conversation's totally laced in grace for those listening. I mean, uh, I am grateful that I was able to do a breech, vaginal breech delivery because that's what I wanted to do, and I think that my goal going forward with this conversation is you really do have choices, and I think that's the part that's not talked about enough. But I agree with you, Dr. Stu. I mean, there are some pretty awful comments and some things that if I were reading them as a mom, I would think, oh my gosh, like all these fingers are pointed at me. And I think that's not true. I think, especially now that I've had an opportunity, my first was the most beautiful, peaceful home birth. My second was a chaotic hospital birth. So I think having those polar opposite perspectives, I really do believe that birth is something that we need to have a village coming around us for. We need to have mentors. We need to have people who are in our back pocket, who know more than we do, who can navigate it with us. And that's just not the case for a lot of women right now. A lot of them are navigating it by themselves. So just
Well,
adding
if
that
you come
little.
from a place of fear, which is where doctors come from, doctors are trained in fear, and then they project it onwards to the women of America and women of our country.
Mm,
It affects everything. It affects how your baby's being developed inside of you. It affects how you perceive everything, that filter of fear. And ultimately, what we'd like to do is change the way we educate our young girls and boys and have them understand that pregnancy is not an illness, pregnancy is not a disease, pregnancy is not a high-risk condition simply because a sperm and egg happen to meet. Pregnancy is a normal physiologic event that, like anything else in your body, occasionally goes awry. And for that, you need medical attention. But just because you're pregnant does not imply you need medical attention.
mm,
And yet we have a culture where most women believe that when they get pregnant, the first thing they need to do is find an obstetrician and have blood work drawn and have ultrasounds and have all this testing done and go in and be labeled with things that make them more nervous, like, oh my God, you're over 35, or, many, many different labels that we put on women just to for what purpose?
right.
Because labeling a woman high risk increases the chance that they'll be high risk because now you're changing their brain
Right.
chemistry because now they're worrying their entire pregnancy. When being over 35 is not high risk. Being too short or too fat is not necessarily high risk. Being diabetic doesn't necessarily make you high risk. Some diabetics are high risk. Not all diabetics are high risk. Yet medical model, once you're labeled a diabetic, will put you into an algorithm and treat you all the same. The fear around breech babies, which is, I guess, our the main topic for today, does not is not high risk.
Right.
And this gets to the real issue is, well, if I asked 100 people to define high risk, I would get 110 different answers because there
Yep.
is no
That's so true.
definition for high risk. High risk is ultimately something that makes your physician uncomfortable. And that's what it is. How can I say that? Because they will suggest things to you because you're high risk that the suggestion they're giving you is actually riskier than the thing that they're wanting to treat.
Yep.
And you may have heard me say this sometimes, but which is riskier, being over 35 or being induced? Because you're over 35. Being induced certainly carries more risk, but they will tell you that being over 35 is the high risk thing.
Right.
But high risk is not a number because, and I use examples like this, you break down what's the risk of a breech baby having a problem compared to a head down baby having a problem vaginally. And the best numbers come out of the Royal College of OB-GYN's Green Top Guidelines from 2017, which suggest that the neonatal morbidity or mortality rate for a vaginal delivery with a head down baby is about 1 per 1,000. And with a breech baby, it's about 2 per 1,000. So what the medical model has decided is that we're going to section 1,000 women with breech babies to save one baby. But what are they doing to the other 999 women who didn't need to have a C-section? Or they're creating more morbidity for that mother. That baby, as it comes out through the skin instead of through the vagina, pulled out without the microbiome, without the trials and tribulations of labor, without the hormonal symphony with mom during labor and all that stuff. And they're putting mom at more risk because now she's had a surgical birth. And there's a risk of future ruptured uteruses or future placenta accretas or bowel obstructions or adhesions or pain or other issues that go along with major surgery. And they're putting all that mom's future babies at greater risk because now all those babies have to deal with the scarred uterus issue.
Hmm.
And one of the things I found, which was remarkable, was that when I would interview a woman who's coming in with her first baby for a breech consult, because she was referred to me probably by her doula,
Mhm.
because she was seeing an OB locally in Los Angeles, one of the questions I would ask them among many was, did your doctor who's suggesting you have a C-section ever ask you if you want more children?
Oh, wow.
And the
Yeah.
answer was universally no. They never asked that question. Because to the medicalized doctor, all that matters is getting that baby alive in a bassinet.
Right.
And if they section that woman, they're going to have less liability. It's going to take less time. They're going to take less heat from their partners or the hospital system or whatever else. Everything is more expedient about doing a C-section, so they just succumb to it, even though they have to know in their hearts, no matter what they've been taught about breech birth being dangerous, that if all they have to do, the literature's out there, they just don't look about how actually safe properly selected breech is in skilled hands at
Right.
term. So they recommend C-section and they scare women out of having a vaginal delivery because one extra baby per 1,000 might suffer a tragic outcome.
Right. Well, but I
People think and
appreciate.
that's labeled high risk.
Right. I appreciate too how you always bring this perspective of also looking not just at the birth, but also at what happens after the birth. How is this baby set up for a future trajectory of success because they have the microbiome, because they haven't, been immediately pulled from their mom post baby, or just any number of things that I don't think aren't necessarily talked about in the medical approach to birth. It's literally just let's get to the birth. That's it. It's like a very
That's
black
right.
and
Well,
white perspective.
it's called the medical gaze. It's a very interesting thing, the medical gaze. This is what doctors do. And when it comes to birthing, you can see it because they'll take care of you. Again, the system is screwed up totally because you may have a doctor through your prenatal care, but they're in a group of 7 people. And so you go into labor one night and you have some stranger come in and take care of you because you've never met them
Right.
before. That system is screwed up as it is. But they don't look at downstream because they, on the second day postpartum, they send you home and they say, we'll see you in 6 weeks.
Right.
And so Now what? What do I do in 6 weeks? So what the medical gaze is, an example that I use when I teach my breech seminar is a woman comes to you with vaginal discharge. It's different, it's unusual for her. It's not her normal discharge, it's vaginal discharge. And so the first thing that you do is you take a swab and you look at it under the microscope and you look for clue cells, you look for yeast, you look for trichomonas, you look for other things to see if you find anything. If you don't find anything, you probably write a prescription anyway and you send her on her way. And then she comes back a couple weeks later and it's not better and blah, 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 blah. And you focus on the discharge. You don't focus on the woman.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't ask the woman, what do you think's going on? And several times in my career, I've had women tell me that they think their husband's cheating on them. And that's why they're coming in complaining of discharge. They don't really have a discharge. They're just complaining because so if you look at the person,
Wow.
you might find something, but the medical model is trained not to look at the person. So
Right.
the focus of attention of doctors becomes the affliction and not the afflicted person.
Right. Right.
We've lost that humanity in medicine.
Right.
And we're very quick because of our time constraints, because we have to do volume in order to make a living and pay our overhead, that we're very quick to then write prescriptions or refer them to somebody else or have them follow up for another appointment. And a woman comes in for an annual checkup and you do a pelvic exam and you feel a mass on her ovary. In my practice, I would suggest that we do an ultrasound right then and there to help her feel more comfortable about this, maybe just a functional cyst or whatever. But in a lot of practices, they'll just say to her, well, we're going to send you for an ultrasound for 2 weeks, in 2 weeks from now. So what's the
then
woman
2
thinking
weeks
for
of
2
stress.
weeks?
Yeah.
She's stressing beyond belief that I got cancer.
Right.
Well, not even close to cancer, but you don't have time to talk to her about the likelihood that this is a normal thing. And maybe I won't even do anything and it'll go away in 2 weeks, but they don't talk to them like that. They just send them out and have them come back. And so there's no concern for the actual individual. That's what you were saying earlier, is that we focus on the disease process and not the person.
Right.
And that's really true in obstetrics, where really we need to focus on the mom and pay much more attention to her desires, her intuitions, her anxieties, her wishes, all those things, which again, because the way the system is designed, modern doctors do not have time to do that. Midwives do.
It's very unfortunate.
Traditional midwives do. I mean, we're not talking about the medification of midwifery too. Another potential problem down the road and midwives become medicalized for many reasons, many of which are, fear of litigation, fear of licensing issues. That's a whole nother podcast for a whole nother topic, but
Right.
right. See, this
It's
is the problem.
definitely,
I think I wrote you yesterday that you said, how long are we going to record for? And you said this many minutes. And I said, well, we might get through 2 of your questions, or at least I was talking to somebody here in my house about, there's no way I'm getting through this list of questions that you sent.
Oh my gosh, no, we have to, because I literally, I'm curious to your answer for all of them, but I guess that's on me because
Well, let's start.
I need to get into it. Okay, so we're going to talk a lot about breech birth, but I was hoping, if it's okay, to talk a little bit about some typical cases first, not necessarily breech or twin, just in general, because I think for some moms listening, we need to catch them up to speed a little bit on why fewer interventions usually leads to better outcomes for mom and baby. So if you were explaining that to a new mom, maybe, how would you break that down? Why fewer interventions usually leads to better outcomes?
Yeah, well, I generally would start with nature's design.
Okay.
It's a simple thing. If you have a horse or cats, or you've ever seen, on your Instagram feed, elephants or deer or whatever giving birth, zebras. I saw a zebra birth yesterday on Instagram on the side of a road. The ideal birth setting for any mammal is to be safe, quiet, and unobserved, because it's a hormonal symphony going on between you and your baby. And when that hormonal symphony is interrupted, as your cognitive brain will do, your higher brain function often interrupts your primitive brain functions, your autonomic nervous system. An example of that would be that we normally breathe and digest our food just fine. But say tomorrow you have to go to court because you're testifying in a case and you wake up with diarrhea, or your heart starts pounding, or you're hyperventilating. That's your brain overtaking your normal bodily functions. We don't want that when you're in labor. So if you think about how mammal gets in labor, if your dog's in labor and little kids are running around the house, what do you tell the kids to do?
Go away.
Go away, go outside, leave the dog alone. Do you take away the dog's food and water?
No.
No. Okay. Do you immobilize the dog?
No.
No. Do you strap him to a bed?
No.
No. Right. Do you interrupt the dog constantly taking blood pressures or vital signs or asking the dog if she wants an epidural?
No.
No. Okay. So you leave the dog alone, and generally those things just go well. We, for reasons that may have been noble at one time but have now become commercial, have found that there's billions of dollars to be made in meddling with nature's design. Hospitals don't make money when they don't do stuff.
Hmm.
You can't bill for not doing something. If a woman declines fetal monitoring, it costs the hospital money. If the woman declines an epidural, it costs the hospital money. If the woman declines an IV, it costs the hospital money. If the woman declines blood work, it costs the hospital money. All those things they do to you when you walk in labor and delivery, answering a boatload of questions, going to the bathroom, peeing in a cup, putting on a hospital gown. What does a hospital gown signify? That you're sick, that you're a patient. It's already changing the mindset.
Right.
Why can't you wear nothing? Why can't you wear your own jammies? Why do you have to put on a hospital gown?
Right.
I would tell women first thing when they go to the hospital, if they ever have told to put a hospital gown, say no, not doing that.
Hmm.
Right. Then they put you in a bed. Okay. Then they start an IV. Then they draw blood on you. You don't have to do any of those things. They're all done out of habit and routine for normal, healthy women coming into labor and delivery. There are, again, every time we talk, we're going to have exceptions to the rule. We're going to have people that need these things.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
the algorithm is such that the hospitals don't differentiate. When you come in, the nurses do the same thing on every person that's coming in. And in most hospitals, listen, again, there are exceptions to that too. There are great hospitals, there are great nurses, there are great doctors. But for the most part, doctors and nurses have become sheep, not shepherd, because they're employees of a system. And if they go and do something the system doesn't want, they're going to get yelled at or
Hmm.
fired or whatever. So they're going to follow along, and they're going to do things that aren't necessarily reasonable to be done just because that's how the hospital does it. But they do all those things. Why do they need blood work? Well, we want to have blood in the blood bank just in case you bleed. Well, okay, but many people come to the hospital hemorrhaging, and you're able to transfuse them if necessary.
Right.
You don't have blood in the blood bank waiting for them. Well, we need to know what her hemoglobin is. Well, why do you need to know what her hemoglobin is? She's fine. You've got her
Right.
prenatal records. Her hemoglobin three months ago was 12. Whether it's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 now, what difference does it make? She's fine. She's healthy. You're not going to transfuse her beforehand. You're just drawing it because you justify it by saying it's for safety, but ultimately it's for revenue generation.
Right.
But we've brainwashed the practitioners to believe it's for safety. How do I know that? Because I've been to home births for over 400 times, and not once did we walk in and make a woman pee in a cup and change into a hospital gown or
Right.
start an IV immediately or draw blood on her or anything. And both mother and babies did fine most of the time.
Right.
They didn't need it. And then ultimately, they put the woman in bed and they put the belts on you, and now you're confined to bed. Think about that dog or that cat or that horse or that zebra, and think about what we're doing to the human female when she shows up at the hospital. Another thing about if you go to a home birth, you'll almost never find the woman laying in bed.
Hmm.
She might be
Right.
leaning on the bed. She might be on all fours on the bed. She might be in the kitchen. She might be in the bathroom, in the shower, but she's not going to be laying in bed. Yet the hospital, because it thinks of pregnancy as a high-risk medical condition, puts you in a bed because that's the center of the room, because that's how hospitals are designed. They're not designed by people thinking that labor is not, you're not coming in to have your gallbladder removed.
Right.
But to them, you are. To them, it's all the same. The bed is the center of every labor room.
Right.
The bed should be off in the corner someplace. And the woman shouldn't even be involved with the bed unless she wants to.
Hmm.
But no, that's where they put you. And they have to put you in there so they can check you. And then you can't move. And then you end up with an epidural because you're uncomfortable and you can't deal with pain as any other mammal would, which is to roll or get up or pace or we mammals don't get in the shower, but we do.
Right.
But you can't do those things at the hospital. And so you ask for the epidural, and that leads to your contractions spacing out, and then you have Pitocin, and that leads to babies not tolerating labor. Maybe the epidural dropped your blood pressure a little bit, and then the baby's not tolerating labor. It's making the doctors nervous, and then you end up with a suggested C-section. And you have a C-section for what's called fetal intolerance to labor, but the baby comes out just fine, and everybody's happy because they got a good baby.
Right.
But the whole thing was iatrogenic. How do I know this? Again, it's just common sense. 50 years ago, the C-section rate in our country was 5%, yet the outcomes were no worse than they are now.
5%.
1970, 5%.
Wow.
And the rate of neonatal death, the rate of neonatal morbidity, the rate of NICU admissions and stuff has doubled in the last 15 years.
Wow.
So we're doing all these things and we're getting sicker babies? Or are we just getting more reasons to find ways to put babies in the NICU because the NICU generates a lot of revenue for the hospital? And that's neither answer suggests that the medical model is doing a good job. And yet this is the model by which most doctors want to practice because it's all they know and they feel safe and comfortable in it. Because to go outside it is to get ostracized.
Right. I was just thinking that. I think that there is also...
It's like doctors who came out against COVID.
Right.
A lot of them lost their professorships. Some of them lost their board certifications. Some of them got fired from their job. They were right. Didn't matter that they were right.
Doctors aren't given the autonomy.
That even if they were wrong, it was certainly reasonable to hear their opinion.
Right. They're not given the autonomy that they deserve.
Nope.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answered the question, which was, what was the original question?
Just why fewer interventions leads to better outcomes. I think you illustrated it, that it's just sort of one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another.
Right. The thing that you can do if you're going to have a hospital birth, it's really important that you have wise people around you to keep you out of the hospital until it's absolutely necessary for you to go there.
Yes.
The last thing you want to do is go to the hospital too early. But you will have your doctor tell you if you break your bag of waters, you should go to the hospital. Or if your contractions are 4 minutes apart for an hour or 2 hours, you should go to the hospital. It's absolutely not true. Sometimes it is. A broken clock is right twice a day. So sometimes they're right. But most of the time, you don't want to go to the hospital too early because if you go to the hospital too early and you're only 3 centimeters dilated, they're not going to leave you alone.
Right.
Ideally, you could go back home again, and that's okay. But all that disruption, by the way, is going to stall your labor out.
Right.
Very likely.
Thinking about the dog, right?
Get in the car and driving, and having to answer questions and bright lights and, all that other stuff is going to slow down your labor because it's if your dog or even a mammal in the wild, if it's interrupted, if there's a predator that's approaching or if little kids run in the room, the dog doesn't continue to labor. The dog's brain shuts down labor. It puts out adrenaline, which stops contractions or slows them down. And the dog gets up and goes someplace else.
Right.
And only when it's safe does labor return. This way, nature ensures the most likely chance of survival. This is normal. This is how it's all supposed to work. This is something that my colleagues have forgotten.
Right.
I did my first lecture that I ever used to go around and teach was called Home Birth is Not Just for Hippies, What Mammals Know and We've Forgotten.
Mm.
And that lecture, that's 10, 15 years old, that lecture, and it still applies. It's actually, things have only gotten worse.
Well, I think that's why I really overemphasized how grateful I was for your resources going into a hospital birth after having a home birth, because it was like sheer discipline to shut out the many, many, many distractions. And I'm grateful it was my second birth, but it gave me a lot of empathy for women going through, and that's their first time experience, is they're just thrown into this chaos and they're trying to labor, but they're like the dog that just keeps getting interrupted. And it's hard. It's really hard, especially if you haven't proven to yourself already that I know I can do this. I'm just going to ignore all of the millions of things going on right now and shut it out, because that's really what I had to do. But it's very hard. Can you also walk us through physiologically, because you talk a lot about this skill of doing nothing in birth. And so if we had just this, picture perfect birth, physiologically, what is unfolding when there is no pressure or disruption? Just really quick, walk us through exactly what's happening. Because I honestly think a lot of women don't actually know step by step what goes on in your body to get the baby out.
Okay, I want to just sum up what we said just before, in that women should give birth in the place they feel safest. And if you feel safest at the hospital, that doesn't mean you need to succumb to all the hospital policies.
Right.
I have a T-shirt from the Rogue Therapist that says policies are not laws. So long before you're pregnant, or certainly early in your pregnancy, you need to go check out your community hospitals. You need to find out everything you can about them. Find out if if you say, oh, listen, I don't want an IV or I don't want to be monitored continuously, how do you support that? Do you support this? Do you support me bringing my own food? Can I wear my own clothes? Can I bring in whoever I want? Can I play my own music? Can I do the things? Can I be left alone if I want to be? I just want to be in the hospital because I feel safer knowing that there's emergency help down the hall, but I don't really want to be intervened upon. Find out if that your hospital even allows that. Because if that's what you want, then maybe you have to travel to the next town.
No, that's great advice.
Or go across state lines to find the place that's going to do that for you. Have your hospital birth, but don't succumb to the fact that they have policies that say you can't do that thing, because their policies don't override your autonomy. Never, never, never. That's a basic tenet of medical ethics, that given the same information, we should not expect two people to come to the same conclusion. And we have an ethical obligation to support the decisionally capable woman's choices. That's our ethics, violated every single day in every doctor's office and in every hospital around the world. But that is supposedly the gold standard of our ethics. Okay.
Good advice. Yep. Good advice.
Doing nothing. All right. Well, first of all, for me as a medically trained doctor, when I started doing home birthing, I would say that was the hardest thing for me, was to do nothing. So I learned very quickly, because I have male energy, and I also trained in a system that when I was called to the delivery room by the nurse, whether I was a resident or in private practice in my office or at home, they called me when it was time for me to come in and do something. So that something could be do a vag exam. That something could be to rupture membranes or to order Pitocin or to do something. It was never to come in the room, don't say a word, go sit in a chair in the corner, sit for 20 minutes, watch how amazing she's doing, quietly walk out of the room, take the husband out in the hallway and say, wow, she's doing great. I'll be back later. I've never trained in any of that sort of thing. That's a midwife trait. So I deferred to midwives to teach me those sorts of things when I first started going to home birth. So the art of doing nothing is very important. It's important in all deliveries, including especially breech deliveries, but you have to know when to intervene and when not to intervene. And for most women, they don't need anything. That may sound shocking to people listening to you because of the way our culture has treated pregnancy. But most women need somebody who knows birth, who trusts birth, to be around as my friend Alex Evangelidi used to say, be a birth ninja or a ninja lifeguard. So essentially be a lifeguard sitting on a chair, watching everybody enjoying their day on the beach and only coming off the lifeguard chair when trouble approached, a riptide or something like that. That's what we should be doing with birth. And hospitals should be able to do the same thing, except the hospital policies are written by administrative people and risk managers who don't know this stuff. Right. And they're written by maternal fetal medicine doctors who only see pregnancy as high risk because that's their specialty. So to them, pregnancy itself is a high risk condition. Therefore, you have to treat all people the same because it limits our liability.
Right.
If we let doctors individualize and we get a bad outcome, we can't defend that as much as if we get bad outcomes, but we followed our protocol. So we're going to follow our protocol no matter what. So it's very hard to do nothing. But ultimately, most pregnancies, from the time of conception and growing a baby to the magic that the mom and baby are communicating throughout, sharing not only cellular material, but electromagnetic things, hormonal things we don't understand, together. The magic that causes a baby to trigger labor. Some people think it's the baby's brain. Some people think it's the placenta. Some people, doesn't really matter. Something in normal pregnancies. We're not talking about women who go into preterm labor or women with severe growth restriction who need to be delivered early, but we're talking about the normal pregnant women. Something magical happens and labor is triggered. It's not exactly at 40 weeks. We should get rid of due dates. We should have due windows, and we shouldn't focus so much on a due date.
Right.
Right. Because by definition, a due date is the median.
Right.
Which means that 50% of women are going to go past their due date. And it always seems like it's more than 50%, but technically it's not. I mean, mathematically it's not. But if you're defining going past your due date as being something pathologic, then you're saying that 50% of women have pathology. And of course, that meets the medical model because that's great, because then they can do their interventions, which they can bill for. their
Yeah.
non-stress tests and their biophysical profiles and their growth ultrasounds and their inductions, and they can schedule around their schedule and all that stuff. And so that works well for their system, but it doesn't work well for the mothers and babies.
Yeah. I mean, it
So
actually
there's a
causes a lot of
magic thing that
anxiety when
happens.
you're going over your due date. It's like, oh my gosh, like
Well, that's why you
something's
shouldn't
wrong.
tell family members or anybody when you're due, because everybody's going to then bring in their anxieties and then what their doctor told them that it's
Right.
dangerous. And so that sort of thing. So just be smart. If you're due September 1st, tell everybody you're due by mid-September. And that way you won't have to deal with that.
Good advice.
So, and so this magical thing happens where labor is ensued, and then nature knows what to do. We talked about being quiet, safe, and unobserved. So you want to labor in that environment. No woman voluntarily goes to where there's bright lights and noises to go into labor.
Right.
Where do they go? If they're at home, they'll go into their
Solitude.
bedroom, they'll go into the bathroom, the lights will be low. That's what they'll do. We do the opposite. We take women from their most perfect nest they could possibly have, which is their own house, their own home. And we make them get in a car and drive to a triage area, an emergency room, where they're asked all these questions and brought upstairs. And we've gone through already the cascade of things that then interfere with nature's design. So again, doing nothing. And only when things start to go awry, if, like, midwives are experts in normal birthing. Doctors are experts in abnormal birthing. But being an expert in normal birthing as a midwife means that when something's abnormal, she's going to recognize it like that.
Right. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The analogy that I always use when I teach this is if you live in the same house for 20 years and you go out for dinner and you come home and the chair in the front hall is moved 3 inches from where it normally is, you know immediately something's wrong. Was there an earthquake? Did the dog hit it? Has there been a burglar? I don't know
Right.
what's wrong, but I know something's wrong. That's the way it is for most midwives who do home birthing. They know what normal is. When things aren't going normally, they recognize that long before it becomes a problem. It's very rare for somebody at home with a skilled midwife or a skilled doula to have something go wrong that's missed
Hmm.
suddenly. You don't see the rapid deterioration of fetal status that you might see in a hospital where they go from 1 minute the baby's fine to now the baby has a bradycardia.
Right.
And then you look back and yeah, she's got Pitocin. She hasn't eaten in 20 hours. She's hypotensive. She's on hyperstimulated on Pitocin. Well, duh. Yeah. The baby had a bradycardia and we needed to thank God we had an operating room down the hall. And so they'll project that onto the home birth and say, well, what happens if this happens? But the thing is, if you're doing nothing, it's very unlikely that this is going to happen.
Right.
So when we used to come to a home birth, Brigitte, I mean, you've experienced this now. So when your team came in, they didn't come in and say, we're here, and they didn't, they come in quietly. They set down
Yep.
their stuff. One person will come back to wherever you are and just kind of watch you for a little bit, maybe listen to the baby for 4 or 5 minutes just to get the sense of the
No,
baby the first
they
time.
mesh right in. They literally just mesh into what you're already doing.
Yeah, they quietly respect the space.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas that's not the case in the hospital setting because you're not their priority. Their priority is getting the job done, getting a baby out, and how it gets out isn't really their concern. And how your experience isn't their concern.
Right.
If there was an RVS code that said, when a patient rates you a 10, you get paid this many dollars for your obstetrical care for that delivery. If they rate you a 2, you get paid only this many dollars. Maybe we'd see a change in the way hospitals work because that's basic economics. You want more of something, you subsidize it.
Yeah.
If you want less of something, you tax it. But that's not the way it works. We could easily change the C-section rate in the United States tomorrow.
Yeah.
By just paying more for vaginal birth and less for cesarean. Why not?
Right.
It takes more skill to do a vaginal birth than it does to do a cesarean. I don't care that a surgeon says, well, I went all these years to become a surgeon to do that. And, a taxi driver can catch a baby. Well, yeah. But after you've done C-sections for several years, they're essentially routine.
Mm-hmm.
And they take far less time. You're in at 7:30, you're out at 8:20. With somebody in labor, you may have to sit around the hospital for hours and hours and hours.
Right.
and you get paid less. The hospital gets paid more for the C-section because they value surgery over skill and consultative skills. So they always pay more for surgery than they do for, I can't think of the medical term that's used for that in billing, but a diagnosis and, well, it's consulting, whatever it is. Your time is less valuable than surgery.
Right.
Let's
right.
change that.
Right. Definitely.
Let's pay more. I mean, if you don't want to pay less for surgery, let's pay more for giving people time. Let's pay doctors better rates for their obstetrical care when their C-section rate is below 20%.
Yeah.
Why not?
I mean, these are all great ideas.
People will say,
honestly.
well, that's coercive. And I'll go, yeah, it is. That's how it works.
Yeah.
Coercion can work both ways. Coercion can be used for good, too. I mean, you as a parent use coercion on your kids. Maybe the child psychologists say you shouldn't do that, but you often tell them, if you do this, we'll go to McDonald's.
Oh, yeah, all the time.
That's coercion.
Yep.
Right.
Well, maybe not McDonald's, but
not McDonald's. I'm speaking of general population.
Yeah, no, definitely. I did that just today with a truck sticker. If you do this, you get a truck sticker. Works every time. This is actually a pretty good segue, if you don't mind, into a little bit more of the breech specific, because most moms who have a breech baby are automatically told it means a C-section. Can you explain why breech birth is not inherently dangerous? Because that's a lot of the pushback I got was like, oh, it's dangerous. Oh, it's dangerous. So what evidence shows, compared to that fear-based messaging, why is breech birth just another variation of normal?
Well, it used to be taught that way. And for whatever reason, the powers that be in medicine decided that they felt like C-section was safer for them to do it. And so what they did was they devised a study that confirmed that. One of the worst studies ever published. It should never have been gotten through peer review. It's called the Term Breech Trial. Because prior to the Term Breech Trial, which came out in 2000, in the 80s and 90s, there were articles coming out about how vaginal delivery was better for breech, and there were articles coming out that saying cesarean was better for breech. And there was a debate, but breech was still taught as a skill, although it was diminishing in hospitals around the world already. So for some reason, they decided that they wanted to codify this. So they came out with a paper that said that breech birth by cesarean section is safer. And this just made hospital systems and doctors joyful, because now they could just do C-sections at 7:30 in the morning and be out by 8:20. But the issue is that this was not the case, that the data didn't support that. And if you looked deeper into data on many different countries and many different studies, almost all the data suggests that the difference is minimal in that current pregnancy, and actually it's better for mom and baby if they deliver vaginally in that pregnancy and then for mom's subsequent pregnancies. But again, we've talked about that already. They don't look down the line. They only look at this, this one situation. So it met the model by which they wanted to practice, and therefore it was adopted in all these medical schools and residencies, and they stopped teaching breech delivery, and they started teaching that it was fearful. It was a psyop, basically. Because it's not true. I already told you the numbers. The risk is about 1 per 1,000 greater of a loss. And the major injuries in breech studies, the ones that were the brachial plexus injury or a neck injury or something like that, are, if not greater than, equal in the babies being born by cesarean section breech than by our vaginal delivery. So the breech baby is more susceptible to injury simply because it's breeched, no matter which way it comes out, whether it's by cesarean section or not. Some of the worst injuries in the Term Breech Trial were babies born by cesarean section.
Wow.
But they're not looking at that because those things didn't make statistical significance. But so we end up with a environment that says that breech is dangerous. Yet, if you look at it from skilled practitioners and if you look at the literature, properly selected breech babies at term and even before term, anything beyond about 32 weeks, about 1,500 grams, which is about 3 pounds, 5 ounces, which is about 32 weeks. Gobs of evidence, that's not a great word, but there's lots of evidence out there that suggests that there's no benefit to doing cesarean section. Yet your average obstetrician doesn't know this. They're not taught it. They don't want to know it. They don't look deeper into it. Even if they wanted to support breech delivery, their practice, their partners, their hospital system isn't going to let them do it anyway. So why should they do it? Well, they should do it because 2 reasons. One, it's their ethical obligation to give women the right choices. And 2 is that every now and then, no matter how hard you want to section all breeches, some woman's going to come into labor and delivery with a baby's bottom sticking out,
Right.
and people aren't going to know what to do. And then you're going to end up with a real mess. Whereas a skilled practitioner in breech could have that baby out safely in probably 10 to 20 seconds. They're going to push that baby back up inside, take the mother to the OR, give her general anesthesia, cut her open, deliver that baby under general anesthesia. The baby will end up going to the NICU. The mom has no memory of the birth of her child. The baby doesn't get delayed cord clamping. The mom has a surgical birth, which now compromises all her future babies. And they think that they went home and said that we did a good job.
Right. Could
That's
you
what they
could you
think.
explain just a little bit, because I, not to interrupt, but something that gave me tremendous confidence was understanding how breech delivery happens. Can you explain that to us? Because I
Well,
know, like,
sure.
for me personally, like, the OB who delivered did, like, the corkscrew method. And I think going in and understanding, also just, like, the idea that on a baby, like, their head is really not that much different in the width of their hip
It's
to butt
smaller,
area.
actually. If you take a newborn baby and you take a measuring tape and go around the baby's butt and thighs, you'll find that that circumference is wider than is larger than the head circumference in
Oh,
normal babies. We're not talking about babies with anomalies or anything like that. We're talking about normal
cool,
babies.
cool.
So, if you have friends who have a newborn baby, get a tape measure and do it. Just check it out.
Wow, that's so interesting, because a lot of people ask me, "Aren't you, scared of the head getting stuck," or whatever was a lot
Well, that's called
of what you get.
anthropomorphization. And that's because if you and I had our heads stuck in a log or stuck between bars and a fence, we'd be freaking out. Why would we be freaking out? Because we worry about suffocating. But that's because we're using our nose and our mouth to breathe.
Mhm.
Fetuses in utero are not using their nose and mouth to breathe.
Right,
They're getting their oxygen through their umbilical cord. So the fact that the head comes out last is not something that you need to be afraid of.
right.
Doctors do the same thing sometimes with the cord around the neck. They'll say, "Oh, the cord's around the neck. That's too dangerous. We need to do a C-section on you because the cord around the neck and exists in over 40% of babies will have the cord around the neck at least once. The cord around the neck is a normal function. It's probably maybe even it's devised that way to keep it from prolapsing. Who knows? But if we had something tight around our neck, we'd be worried about choking
Right.
because we're using our tracheas. Babies aren't using their tracheas. They can't choke in utero. It's when a baby dies in utero for whatever reason, the cord's around the neck, people will say stupid things like, "Oh, look, the cord was around the neck. That's probably what caused it." No, it's almost never what caused it.
Mm.
But they'll say it anyway because they're anthropomorphizing the fetus. So, how do breech babies come out? Well, the breech has many different positions. The most common is frank breech. That's where the baby's knees and hips are extended, and so the baby's in like the diving pike position. If you think of the Olympics, where the feet are up by the head, and the baby comes out butt first. The second most common position is complete breech, and that's kind of like the tuck position, where your legs are folded underneath you, like you're going to do a somersault, that sort of thing. And sometimes one leg can be up, one leg can be down, and rarely both legs can be sticking straight down. But that's called a footling breech, and that's misunderstood. Footling breeches are nearly impossible at term because there just isn't room. You can see footling breeches in extreme preemies or second twins, but that's a whole nother topic. But we're talking about term twins and term breeches here. Let's just stick with term or anything beyond 32, 34, 35 weeks. We can call that what I'm going to say applies to that. Babies have what are called cardinal movements as a breech. And they come down. Generally, they come down with their butt facing mom's thigh, which is called sacrum transverse. And the butt begins to protrude just like a head does. And sometimes it comes out and then, it goes back in again. And it comes out a little bit further and goes back in again, just like a head. But eventually it'll come a point where it stops. In the head, it's called crowning. And in a breech baby, it's called rumping. And the baby's butt is just sitting there. Now, once the baby's butt is just sitting there, mom doesn't really need to wait too long for next contraction. She can push without contractions because a lot of the baby's not in the uterus anymore. And by the time the baby reaches above the umbilicus, most of the baby's out of the uterus anymore. So waiting is actually potentially dangerous because the placenta can separate when nothing's in the uterus. So you don't necessarily want a woman waiting for her next contraction to push. Once the baby begins to, its rump is just sitting there and sticking out almost to the knees in a frank breech. She should just push when she gets the strength to push. You don't need to coach her, but you tell her, don't wait for a contraction. Just go ahead and push. And she'll push. And the baby in general will begin to rotate. And this is classic. And if they begin to rotate to where their baby's bum goes toward mom's tum, or the baby's backside goes toward mom's pubic bone, and the baby's face goes toward mom's anus, that's the normal rotation. That's called sacrum anterior. And they begin to rotate in that position. And when they do, that means that you know that the baby's arms are in front of the baby's chest, where they belong. And you're not going to have an arm that's stuck up behind the head that may get caught up on a pubic bone or rarely the sacral promontory. So if that baby rotates perfectly and continues to descend, you can just leave your hands off. And now you've got an ability to assess that baby because you can see the baby.
Mm-hmm.
With a head down baby, all you can see is the top of the head. With a breech baby, you can see the skin. You can see the color of the skin. You can see the tone of the skin. You can see something called capillary filling, which we all know what that is when to get a sunburn and you push on your skin, it blanches, you take your finger away and it turns pink again. That just means you're perfusing. That's a good sign. We can see the umbilical cord because now the baby's out past the belly button. So you can see the cord. Does it look robust and juicy or does it look flaccid and white? Pale. If you're seeing these things and they're reassuring, and these are the things we teach in the course, if you're seeing these things and they're reassuring, you can let and baby's rotating properly, you can let mom continue to push. And you have several minutes. I don't like time algorithms, but you have several, moms will push and eventually the legs will come out. And then the one arm will come out, the other arm will come out. And if the mom is in upright positioning, where she's on all fours, you have the baby hanging down, gravity's working, the head will then come out by flexion, which is very interesting because cephalic babies, head down babies, the second to last cardinal movement for them is head extension and then rotation. So babies, either the mom's pelvis guides them or the babies have innate knowledge of what to do and how to get out. Because they'll do certain moves to help. They'll do what are called tummy scrunches. It's a funny name, but to help to bring the arms down. They'll just kind of like trying to get themselves out. And that's what they do. And that is a normal, and that will probably happen 60, 70 plus percent of the time. A breech will need no skills whatsoever.
That's beautiful.
About another maybe 10, 15, 20% of the time, you need just minor skills to deliver that aftercoming head. And then about 15, 20% of the time, you may need really good skills to get a baby out that isn't rotating properly or that isn't showing signs that it's doing good anymore. Its cord looks like crap or it's not got any tone anymore or something like that. And you need to get that baby out quickly. And that's where we teach. You teach the maneuvers, the rotational maneuvers, the sweeps, the flexion of the head or whatever to get that baby out. And it's not that complicated. As a matter of fact, I mean, listen, I grew up in a different era back in the 80s when I was training, but we used to argue about who gets the lady in room 6 with the breech baby because we wanted to do it because it made us feel like obstetricians because in those days, we put our hands on every breech. We didn't know from cardinal movements and we didn't know from upright positioning. All women were on their back and that's the way they deliver. And a lot of doctors are still very comfortable with delivering women on their back. That goes back hundreds of years as to why women were on their back because, prior to the French Revolution or whatever, I guess a certain king, Louis XVI, I think, women delivered in squatting positions and they were surrounded by, other women and, they delivered, basically squatting was how they delivered.
Right.
And then for whatever reason, they would put there's all kinds of things about he wanted to see. So he put her on her back so he could watch. And then that took off now. All the elite people wanted to birth like the king's queen, like the queen. So they did that. But
that's so interesting.
It's best for women who are breech and even head down babies for moms to deliver on all fours. It's much more physiologic. It's not all women can do it. Not all women are comfortable doing it. But I can tell you that most doctors don't know what to do when you turn a mom upside down. Makes them very uncomfortable. They will say, well, you have to get on your back for me to catch your baby. And they say, no, I want to be up on all fours. And they don't know what to do.
Yeah.
They need to learn. It's not hard. You can learn in about 2 hours.
That's also interesting.
I mean, I know this sounds pompous, but you could give me OB residents for a day or two, and none of them will be breech experts when they're done, but they'll all know how to deliver a breech baby. They'll all know how to do an extraction of a second twin. I could teach them that in 2 days.
Yeah.
using
Right.
simulation.
Right.
And yet the residency programs don't want to do that. They don't want to teach their own residents this skill, Brigitte, that affects about 6% of all term pregnancies,
Mm.
because 4% of all term pregnancies will be breech, and about a third of all twins. Excuse me, about half of all, about a third, 1 in 32, twins are 1 in 32 pregnancies. So about what, 3 out of every 100 pregnancies are twins, and half of them are going to have a breech baby. So you add that up, and it gets you to 5 or 6% of term moms have a breech baby in them. And
Wow.
obstetricians, supposedly experts in all things pregnancy, don't know what to do with them other than offer a cesarean.
Wow. Right. Right.
I'd be embarrassed. Again, I've said this many times. I fault the training programs. I fault the doctors themselves, because if you didn't get trained, you should have screamed at your residency program to get trained, or you should go out and get trained now. And even if you're not going to offer breech delivery, you should at least offer counseling about the safety of breech delivery and about helping the woman find an option, or about at least being able to help somebody who comes in with an emergency, right? Or doing a
The
second twin.
emergency is, a great point, right? Because sometimes you just have no idea. When you were walking through just those steps in the delivery of a breech baby, it made me think of, and I do have another question about breech, but first, like the communication between mom and baby just sounds so vital for the mom to be aware physically of her body, of where she's feeling pain so that she can move to accommodate that. But so many women have an epidural. And I want to ask you sort of like, what are your guidelines on when you advocate for an epidural versus when you do not, and why?
Okay, well, in the United States right now, from the latest data that I could find, about 80% of first-time moms and 66% of second-time moms have an epidural.
80?
Yeah, where in Denmark, it's
Wow.
about 10% of women have an epidural. And I would tell you that their outcomes in Denmark are not worse, right? And it's not because women in Denmark are stronger. It's because they have a better understanding of physiologic birth.
Right.
So when is an epidural indicated? Well, certainly there are great times for an epidural. This is not an easy question to answer in this format, because every individual woman has a tolerance for discomfort. And every individual woman is working with her own set of fears and anxieties and confidence and trust. And so in our world, if a woman is struggling and not making progress and is really exhausted, and we've tried resting them, we've tried giving them sleep, we've tried giving them food, or we tried giving them ice cream, we've tried doing things that might help bring their contractions back. But if they've spaced out, or if they're just not coping well, and midwives, again, are experts at understanding normal when a response from a woman isn't normal, and you can't tell who's going to have that response and who's not. There are women in my practice who I thought, we used to joke and say, oh, there's no way she's having this baby vaginally. She has this birth plan. Oh, we laugh at her birth plan, and she's not in front of her, but, at the nurse's station or something like that. There's no way. And then she would pop that baby out really fast.
Wow.
So this is not something that's predictable. But if a woman is having a real struggle, then an epidural can be a godsend for her.
Right.
And if a woman is given informed consent about the benefits and the risks of an epidural, and wants one anyway, then she should have one. We are advocates for informed decision-making. The problem is that most women are given the benefits of an epidural but are not told the risks.
Right.
They're told cursory risks like, oh, well, you could get a little hematoma and you could have a headache for a couple of days. That's what they're told. They're not told how it interferes with the process and the communication between mother and baby. I've had this theory about why is labor painful, and it's painful because mom puts out hormones that help her cope with the discomfort, but those hormones also cross the placenta and help the baby cope with the discomfort. And a lot of times the mom will get an epidural and she's no longer uncomfortable, so she's not secreting hormones anymore. And we see the deterioration of the baby's status, and we can't figure out why. And maybe it's because baby's no longer communicating with its mother. It's lost its mom.
Yeah.
And now it's left to deal with something that's stressful for the baby. It's never experienced anything like this before. It doesn't know what to do. And mom is now sleeping. But she's now contracting regularly because Maybe they've even put her on Pitocin because her contraction's spaced out. She's
Right.
comfortable, but baby's terribly uncomfortable, and that communication has been severed. And then you see the fetal heart rate tracing become more intolerable to the people watching it. And so they end up suggesting interventions that lead to forceps or vacuums or cesarean when they weren't necessary in the first place.
Wow.
Epidurals are a necessary tool in the toolbox. But again, how many women had an epidural in 1970? Oh, less than 10%, I'm sure, if they even,
Okay.
did them. I mean, in the 50s and 60s, they used twilight sleep. They put women out and they pulled babies out with forceps. That's how yours truly was delivered.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. My mom has no memory of the actual birth.
That's insane.
Well, it's more insane now because we put more emphasis on it. Back then, they didn't know what they were missing.
Right. Right.
They were they were brainwashed in a different way. We're all brainwashed to the tune of our times.
Right.
But they were brainwashed in a different way. And then they kept them in the hospital for a week or so after birth. And they had hairstylists come in and they gave them meals, and babies were in were separated from their moms most of the time. They were in the bassinet, lined up. You've seen those pictures of them all lined up behind the glass, and every couple hours they'd be brought out to their mom to feed them
Oh
if
my
they weren't
gosh.
already being transitioned to formula. And
Okay, that
again, this
makes me
is
want to
all
cry.
thought to be genius, but
Yeah.
it's all intervening in nature's design.
Yeah. 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 No, that's just horrible to that like the your baby's whole world is literally just mom and then mom is gone.
Yep,
But
inside and out.
that's really interesting to note, the theory that like it severs the communication between mom and baby. I mean, like I've only thought about it in practical terms of like when I was in labor and I felt pain. I liked it because it was a feedback loop that told me, okay, move this way. And then that just, continued to help labor progress.
Well, if you've ever watched a woman in labor who's unfettered, like at home, they don't sit still.
Yeah.
If the baby's asynclitic, which means the baby's head is turned sideways a little bit, you'll watch them. They'll end up twisting their hips or lifting one leg up on the side of the bed, stretching themselves out that way, or one leg goes up on the stairs, or they'll get on a ball and they'll rock on a ball, or they'll roll on something, or they'll get down on all fours. They'll move to help the baby navigate the pelvis because you're getting feedback from the baby's presenting part, whether it be the butt or the head, on your pelvic organs, and your brain is perceiving that, and your body is
Right.
moving in order to accommodate that.
Right.
Once you put a woman in bed and she can't move, you're more likely to get a baby that becomes asynclitic or turns occiput posterior. And now you can't help that baby. So then you get an epidural, which then codifies that position. And now you're more likely to end up with an intervention like a forceps delivery or vacuum or a C-section. You just
Right.
are. And anyone
Well,
who
and I
says that that's not true is lying. They're lying to you. Right.
I think one of the biggest things there too is just again returning to the importance of moms having confidence that they can do it. That like you were literally built to do this, and your mind is intuitively going to know what to do. Obviously, if you have the right support there. I have
Yeah. It's
one
just,
more.
again, we don't know who's not and who is, but for the most part, if it's your second or third baby and you already had one vaginal delivery, your success rate at home is 99%. It's common. With first-time moms, it's 80 to 85% success rate at home. But the ones that transfer to the hospital, rarely is it for emergency.
Mhm.
But we can't tell which women are going to end up truly needing intervention. I mean, even back 50 years ago, like 5% of women needed a C-section.
Right.
How many zebras need a C-section?
Right.
Zero. Right.
Yep.
So somehow, I mean, just the human condition is such that we have other variables that come into play besides mammals just being out in the wild, but yet we cannot forget where we came from. And we cannot forget that nature has designed a system over eons. And when we meddle with it, we better be damn sure that the meddling thing that we're doing is safe before we just universally install it. And the history of medicine has been such that they've ignored that tenet constantly over and over and over again. They bring things in and do them only to find out later that they were unsafe or they didn't do what they thought they were going to do. Yeah, I mean, the history is wrought with stupidity. The people that run my profession are, they may have degrees behind their name. They may, have achieved greatness in academia and stuff like that, but they're not wise. They are
Mm,
not wise.
that's a good way of putting it. I do have one question that I don't want to forget about breech, if you don't mind,
Sure,
and
we've
that
got
is
about
just
10 more minutes, I think.
do you have like any theories on why babies turn breech?
Oh, there's lots of theories. I don't have one that's overriding. I mean, if a baby is
What are some of the
anatomically
theories?
normal, what?
What are some of the theories?
Well, if a baby's anatomically normal, the most common theory is unknown. Uterine anomalies, I don't like that term so much. Uterine variations, I guess, would be a better term. Like a septate uterus or bicornuate uterus, you're far more likely to have a breech baby just because the way the uterus is shaped. Um, Sometimes it may have to do with, again, these are theories because I can't vouch for them. But when there's fear involved, whether that's fear in the mom that's projected to the baby wants to get its head away from that fear place as much as possible.
Mm,
So it turns around so it doesn't have to face coming out.
yeah,
So I don't know if that's the case. I've seen some very, very confident, smart women have wonderful breech delivery. So I don't think that that theory holds water.
yep,
But everybody's always looking for explanations. I just think it's a variation of normal.
it's interesting.
It's I don't know if we can find any relation because I don't think the percentage of breech delivery has significantly changed in the last 100 years since records have been being kept. And despite the additional rise in all the other interventions that have occurred, like
Right.
cesarean and continuous monitoring and ultrasound and all those things. And despite the G and the toxins and the food and the stuff they're blowing in the air and all that, I don't know that that has anything to do with it because I don't think we've seen a rise in that. Although there are some midwives who say they think they're seeing more breaches now. But again, unless we keep track, anecdotes are data, but they're not scientific. They're not high quality data.
Right.
So I don't know. Of course, the babies with anomalies, like baby with hydrocephalus or something, that may likely be breech. But for perfectly healthy babies that are breech, I think that sometimes they get in that, they get there, and sometimes they can't move. They get stuck
Well,
that way, or they want to be that way. Sometimes there's a theory that there's something neurologically different about them, and this theory was propagated by the study. Again, they study everything. That looked at breech babies often have less coils in their umbilical cord than head down babies, which means when they're little, they're moving less because the coils form when the babies are little and they can just flip around and do whatever they want. So
oh,
maybe there's
interesting.
something neurologically different about breech babies when they're little and they just settle in breech and they don't move a lot. And so therefore they don't turn. And that's why their cord has less coils in it. That's just a theory.
Interesting.
I've seen breeches that have a huge number of coils in their cord. So it's not, obviously, it's not, you can't universally apply it. So these are just theories. I don't know, but we're not going to be able to solve the breech problem by pretending it doesn't exist.
Right.
So let's just accept breech as a variation of normal and let's start to reteach that basic skill that was normal in the 1970s and 80s when I was training, that
Yep.
it was just a normal skill and every OB knew how to do a breech delivery and we were not afraid of them.
Right. No, that's so good because then you wouldn't have so many women in the pickle that I found myself in. Is like, oh my gosh, like, where am I going to find the one person who's
I talked to
actually
Rick Safries, who runs
trained in
Breach
this?
Without Borders, not infrequently we talk, and our mailboxes are just filled with women searching for hope because they can't find anybody to support them.
Right.
Just as a public service, on the Breach Without Borders website, there is a practitioner finder that people can go to. Maybe you can put it in your show link notes
Definitely. Oh, absolutely.
if they're looking for somebody. Now, they're not vetted. These are people that had just sent in information about their breech training, and Rick says put them on a list. So you'd have to vet them yourself. But anybody who's willing to put their name out there as a breech practitioner is somebody that I generally have respect for as a practitioner who supports physiologic birth. So it's a
Yes.
good place to look for options.
Yeah.
And you may not find any in your area, and you may be told that the only option you have is a cesarean. And your doctors may be very sympathetic about it. They may say, "Listen, I understand. I'm not comfortable with breech delivery, and I can't offer you that." And that's okay. They have the ethical obligation to be honest with you, but not to scare you into thinking that it's unsafe. And they should be helping you find somebody
Right.
elsewhere, even if you have to travel to do it. We had lots of people that came and got Airbnbs out in the West Valley where my office was and they came from other states or other parts of California, and they came down and they hung out for 3-4 weeks in an Airbnb waiting to go into labor so they could have a breech vaginal delivery, either at
Wow,
their at their Airbnb or at a local birth center. Right,
that's great.
right.
Yeah, it's crazy the obstacles you have to go over. I've got one last question, and it is more just related to I think that, again, I've said this before, but you do a really beautiful job of really hammering home the fact that a woman's body was truly built to do this. But for the mom listening who still feels scared, overwhelmed, maybe it's her first time, maybe not necessarily breech or twin, but just like birth in general, what practical steps do you have to give her to build that confidence, to reduce the fear, to cut out all the noise that says she can't do this, and to create that mindset for an intervention-free birth if that's what she if she,
Well, it's hard to cut out all the noise. I don't think that that's even that's possible. I mean, you got family members who have their opinions. You're on social media, and I can't tell you to not talk to your family members and get off social media. That's not a practical solution. Definitely find a doula, and you want to, you want to find a doula that's independent. I'm going to say this more and more now because some doulas are now beginning to take insurance or beginning to work for the hospital in your area. And when a doula takes insurance or works for the hospital in your area, their fiduciary duty is now conflicted because they're no
Mhm.
longer just your doula. They have to respond to the people that are paying their salary. So you want to find an independent doula, and you want to ask questions about your doula and about the practitioners in your area very early on, or even before you get pregnant. You want to find out in your community, do they support breech birth? Do they support VBAC? What happens if I'm 38 weeks and I break my bag of waters and I'm not in labor yet? What do you do? Do I have to do the diabetes screening? I mean, just find out how they respond to these questions. And if they give you the time of day and if they look at you and stuff like that, are they the kind of people that are going to give you confidence, or they're the kind of people who are going to play on your anxieties? Because you don't want those people around you. But having a doula and trusting your doula to then help you find the right practitioner and help you trust your body and understand the processes is probably the best thing that you can do if you've already been indoctrinated into the fear-based birth world, to undo some of that.
Great advice.
And then whether you want a hospital birth or not, I would say at least hire a midwife, pay out of pocket, don't worry about the money, save money, put it aside, and pay out of pocket to have some prenatal visits with a midwife,
Mm,
so that you're not getting your 6-minute OB visit with somebody who's not giving you the time of day, who's spending their time entering data into their EMR and not really even looking you in the eye while they ask you simple questions, or the nurse does all the questions and the doctor comes in for like 3 minutes and just says hi,
that's great advice.
listens to your baby, or does an unnecessary ultrasound or whatever else, and then do that. Find a midwife to have some prenatal visits with. They're going to be an hour and a half long. You're
Yep,
going to talk about your anxieties. You're going to help that to mellow those out. You're going to get a different way of doing things. You're going to have better preventative care. You're going to talk about sleep and about relationships and about nutrition and the things that you can do and exercise, the things that you can do to make sure that your pregnancy is more likely to be healthy,
that's
which you're
great
not going to
advice.
necessarily get from your doctor. You may get some handouts from your doctor, but you won't have really much time to discuss these things with them.
Right, right.
I mean, look at I know all these things, and I just had my knee replacement done. And I've been in, I've had one post-op, 4 weeks post-op. I've had one post-op visit with him. He is a really nice guy. He's a former jock. He's probably a very good orthopedic surgeon. I hope so. But he is, you can't really ask him any questions. He's not really interested.
Right.
And I
Yeah,
don't say that in a bad way. I say that that's the model of care that he's trapped himself in.
yeah,
And doctors are stuck in a model of care that whether by choice or by, active omission, they found themselves in a system that isn't working well for their clients, and yet they don't have the proverbial balls to stand up to it, to leave it, to change it.
yeah.
And so they just go along keeping their head down because they are conflicted. So don't fear birth. Respect it. There's a scene in Interstellar where they're talking about where the woman is talking to the man about I'm trying to think of both their actors' names. Um,
Oh
I'm trying.
gosh.
Anne, what's Anne's last name? Anne
Is it Anne
Hathaway.
Hathaway?
Anne Hathaway and Matthew McConaughey. They're
Yes,
having a
yes.
conversation. See, I'm, My brain that's what happens sometimes when you're on pain medicine. But they're having a conversation about nature. And he asked her about nature evil because a lion will kill a gazelle or whatever else. And he goes, no, it's not evil. Or she says, no, it's not evil. It's formidable. It needs to be respected, but it's not evil. So the same thing goes here. Nature has designed a system to be respected and honored, but not feared.
Mm.
And that's where we should end with that. We should end with breech birth is just a variation of normal. Finding a breech practitioner can be hard these days. We're doing our best. I think if Rixa and the Breech Without Borders team and I, with my Reteach Breech seminars, were not out teaching breech, I think there's no one in the world that's out teaching breech on a large scale. And we can't even consider what we do on a large scale. But at least we're keeping it alive. But it needs to be kept alive because women deserve this reasonable option.
Absolutely.
It was reasonable once. It became unreasonable not because of safety issues. Safety was a canard that was used to help defend them getting rid of it. But safety is an alibi of tyrants. They always do things and tell you to do things for your own good and tell you it's for your own safety when it's not.
Right.
Because there's nothing safe about the way our medical obstetrical system is handling the problems of prenatal care because our outcomes suck.
Yeah. Oh
And
my
we can
gosh.
do better. Midwives can do better. Doctors should take a note. And they should get out of the system that has them railroaded into seeing women every 6 minutes or every 8 minutes, and to being on call and taking care of people that they've never met before and having people that they know deliver with somebody else and never seeing the culmination of their work, and working in an office that's got IKEA furniture in it that has, posters on the wall instead of paintings on the wall, and has a metal desk instead of a nice desk, and has a sliding nameplate on the door of your office where today it's Dr. Smith and tomorrow it'll be Dr. Jones sharing the same office. I mean, doctors used to maybe have a bit of an ego, but certainly were deserving of respect. And I had a beautiful office with paintings on the walls and my diplomas on the walls. And even though that's kind of silly, now if you go to see a doctor, it's very rare that the doctor has its own office anymore. They're in
Yep.
some generic office that today they're on,
Yeah.
they use it, tomorrow the next person who's on uses it.
Yeah. It's
How demeaning
unfortunate
is that
because
to somebody who went through all that years of training to
yeah.
come out to either not know stuff or to know stuff and not be told by some businessman or risk management lawyer that they can't do it anyway.
Yeah. You've
We have to
seen
stand
just
up.
like
Doctors need to stand up.
the deterioration of the patient to doctor relationship, which I
It's
think
been
is at the
purposeful.
crux of
Yeah,
a
it's
lot
been
of things
purposeful.
you've talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
Man.
the idea
Well,
that they changed the name of doctors to providers is just a perfect
yes.
example.
Yeah. That's a great
Providers is
example.
generic. Provider of what?
Right.
And by the way, midwives are only mid-level providers. So now we're no longer doctors and midwives, we're providers and mid-level providers. Do you know how demeaning that is?
Yeah.
And that's not accidental. That's intentional. It's intentional to demean doctors because doctors used to run the show.
Yep.
And that business model didn't work well for the businessmen. And they were smart and we were stupid. And
Yeah.
we let them take over. And now all the doctors that I used to work with at Cedars-Sinai in Los Angeles in that area, I talked to my old partner, Howie, and he told me that either they're all retired or they're all employees now.
Oh,
They've
that's
all
so
sold
sad.
their practices. They all gave it up and they just work a shift. And
Yeah, that's so
again,
sad.
they're delivering people they have no connection to.
Yeah.
And when you have no connection to the people that are in your business, you don't do as good work as when you're connected to them.
Yeah, that's so sad.
Your ability to care for somebody is determined by how close related they are to you. We all care more about our family than we can care about our neighbor, and we care more about our neighbor than we care about somebody who lives across town. And certainly we care more about somebody who lives in our town than we care about somebody who lives in another country.
Right.
That's just human nature.
Right.
And when doctors have been divested from taking any personal interest in you because they know that they're not going to be the one that's on call. And even if they are, if you're still pushing at 7 a.m., they go home.
Yeah.
Somebody else comes in.
Yeah.
That's not what I went into medicine for. And I don't know that the doctors, medical students who are idealistic know what they're getting themselves into. And hopefully it will change because I know that these people are caring people.
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Stu, you remind me of my dad in the best way. I love my dad very much. He used to be a surgeon, and you're echoing a lot of his sentiments. So that's what's making me smile because he's just,
Well, I'm
I think you're
honored by
right. Yeah,
that.
it's a
I'm
really
honored.
big, really big issue that kind of leaves a lot of moms and babies left holding the bag. But I appreciate the work that you're doing very, very much. I think it's something I respect a lot because you just give and give and give. But you're right. It's like if nobody's going to be teaching these things, then the flame's going to go out. So I think this is a really important conversation to have. And for you guys listening, if you want to follow along, I highly recommend his Instagram is at Birthing Instincts. I'll put it in the show notes. He has also an excellent podcast, Birthing Instincts. Like I mentioned before, it was what just gave me so much confidence and equipment going into specifically a breech birth, but I think it applies to any birth. But then also it gave me a lot of comfort and healing post birth to reconcile with the things that, didn't go my way. I could hear someone in my ears as I'm nursing this baby overnight and rocking him to sleep that's, just reiterates, okay, this is a very big issue. There's a lot of grace here. Here's how you can understand it and kind of come to grips. So, Dr. Stu, thank you so much. I think moms listening today are walking away with a lot more confidence because of you, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Brigitte. The giving birth is probably the greatest thing that a woman will ever do, and you can't abdicate your responsibility for it. You have a memory of it all your life. Let's make the memories better for most women if we can. Thanks for having me on.
I'm totally here for it. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to Motherhood Equipped. Remember, you don't have to have it all together. You just have to be willing to bet on yourself and then trust the Lord every step of the way, walking boldly in the purpose He has for you. I remember very vividly searching for my first podcast related to motherhood when I was in the depths of postpartum after having my first, and I would have never found the encouragement I needed had the podcast I found not had enough reviews to show up in my feed when I searched. So I'd love to ask if you would pass this gift along to another mom needing encouragement and leave us a review so that we show up in other people's feeds, and also just share this with one friend who comes to mind. Thanks so much.